Hey guys, tonight we begin with a book. Not just any book, of course. That would be far too straightforward. Tonight we begin with a stubborn, mysterious, mildly rude little manuscript that has spent centuries refusing to cooperate with scholars, cryptographers, librarians, linguists, codebreakers, conspiracy enthusiasts, and at least a few people who really should have gone outside more often. So dim the lights. Put your phone face down. Adjust the pillow into whatever strangely specific shape your neck requires. And settle in as we drift gently into the tangled, leafy, ink-stained world of the Voynich Manuscript. It is one of history's great puzzles. A medieval-looking book filled with strange writing no one can read, drawings of plants no one can identify, women bathing in green liquid for reasons never explained, and astronomical diagrams that seem meaningful in the same way clouds seem meaningful when you are overtired. And through it all, the manuscript sits quietly, saying nothing, which, honestly, is powerful. The story usually begins in a library. That feels right. Mysteries should begin in libraries. Libraries are full of dust, whispers, and documents that can ruin your weekend. The Voynich Manuscript is currently housed at Yale University in the Beinecke Rare Book Library, where it lives in climate-controlled dignity while generations of experts continue to fail publicly in its vicinity. But it did not start there. To understand this book, we first need to imagine Europe sometime in the early 15th century. According to radiocarbon dating of the parchment, the animal skin pages were prepared around 1404 to 1438. So our mysterious object likely emerged during the late medieval period. Castles existed. Bells rang. Monks copied texts. Medicine involved optimism more than effectiveness. And somewhere in that atmosphere, someone made this book. The manuscript contains around 240 pages, though some are missing. It is handwritten in ink. The script is neat, consistent, and elegant. Whoever wrote, it was not doodling nonsense on a rainy afternoon. This took planning. It took time. It took materials that were not cheap. Already that narrows things down. Random nonsense tends to be faster. The writing uses a unique alphabet now called Voynichese. It contains recurring symbols, repeated word patterns, line structures, paragraph shapes, and internal rules that look suspiciously language-like. This is not the scribble of a bored teenager. It behaves, statistically, more like real text than gibberish, which is inconvenient because no one knows what it says. And many have tried. Before we meet the modern hunters, let's float gently over the pages themselves. The manuscript is usually divided into sections based on the illustrations. Since no one can read the text, the pictures are all we have. So scholars do what humans always do when confused. They start naming things confidently. There is the botanical section. This is full of plants. Or, at least things attempting to pass as plants. Some have roots, leaves, flowers, stems. Others look as if several herbs were merged during a paperwork error. One page might show a flower like a sunflower mated with celery. Another resembles a carrot designed by memory. Some suggest real species rendered badly. Others seem imaginary. A few look close enough to known plants to start arguments, which is how academia expresses affection. Then there is the astronomical or astrological section. circular diagrams, suns, moons, stars, zodiac symbols, little women arranged around cosmic wheels. Naturally, several zodiac signs appear, including Pisces, Taurus, and Sagittarius. Around them stand rows of tiny female figures, often holding stars or posing with the serene confidence of people who know they are in a famous mystery. Then comes perhaps the most discussed section, the bathing women. These pages show numerous nude female figures standing in pools, tubes, vats, and connected green channels. Some appear to be bathing. Some appear to be climbing through plumbing. Some appear to be attending a spa designed by an alchemist with no engineering license. People have proposed these images represent medicine, fertility, anatomy, spiritual symbolism, or medieval wellness culture. It is also possible the illustrator simply had a vision and committed to it. There are pharmaceutical-looking pages too. Jars, roots, containers, plant parts. Then recipe-like pages of short paragraphs marked with star bullets. It all feels meaningful. That is the maddening part. Nothing in the manuscript looks accidental. The script flows smoothly from left to right. Words repeat. Certain symbols appear only in some positions, like letters obeying grammar. Some words cluster by section, as if topic-specific vocabulary is being used. Statistical analysis suggests structure. Entropy levels resemble natural languages more than random code. The manuscript keeps whispering, "I make sense," then immediately refusing to elaborate. For centuries, the book's early history is patchy. We do know that by the 17th century, it was in the possession of George Beresch, a scholar in Prague. Beresch seems to have been baffled by it, which places him in a long and honorable tradition. He wrote to the Jesuit scholar Athanasius Kircher, a man famous for attempting to decode Egyptian hieroglyphs and being spectacularly confident in many fields. If there was an unreadable text in Europe, someone eventually mailed it to Kircher. Beresch described the manuscript as a sphinx. That is wonderfully dramatic for a man writing about a book. After Beresch died, the manuscript passed to Johannes Marcus Marci, who sent it to Kircher around 1665 or 1666. In a surviving letter, Marci mentioned that the book had supposedly been bought by Emperor Rudolph II for 600 ducats. Rudolph II was exactly the kind of ruler who would buy a mysterious, unreadable manuscript for a huge sum. He loved art, curiosities, astrology, oddities, and expensive things that might contain secrets. A collector after my own mildly concerning heart. Was the story true? We do not know. That sentence will return often tonight. If Rudolph did buy it, perhaps he believed it was the work of Roger Bacon, a medieval friar later credited with advanced scientific ideas and, conveniently, mystical genius. Bacon became a favorite candidate because mysterious books always attract famous names. No evidence supports this authorship, but evidence has never stopped a good rumor. After Kircher received the manuscript, it vanished into archives for centuries, quietly resting, waiting, being unreadable in Latin silence. Then, in 1912, it re-entered public life through a Polish book dealer named Wilfred Voynich. He acquired the manuscript from the Jesuit Villa Mondragone near Rome and recognized instantly that he had found something special. Or, at least something saleable. Voynich promoted the manuscript energetically. He suggested great antiquity. He hinted at Roger Bacon. He distributed photographs. Scholars became interested. Newspapers became interested. Suspicion became interested. And so the book gained the name it still carries, the Voynich Manuscript. Poor unknown original author, replaced in history by a reseller. There is something modern about that. Once the manuscript became famous, attempts to solve it multiplied. Some believed it was encrypted Latin. Others thought it was shorthand, an invented language, Hebrew, Nahuatl, Chinese transliterated into custom symbols, glossolalia, a hoax, compressed text, women's medical knowledge, alchemy, heresy, or extraterrestrial gardening notes. The extraterrestrial theory arrives whenever humans encounter paperwork they dislike. During the 20th century, professional cryptographers joined the hunt. This included experts who had worked on wartime codes. Men who had cracked enemy systems sat down before the Voynich manuscript and, after much effort, accomplished the same result as everyone else. Nothing. Even National Security Agency analysts reportedly examined it. Imagine spending your career decoding strategic communications and then being defeated by a medieval doodle book full of bath ladies. Humbling. Some researchers argued it must be a cipher. Others said ciphers of that era usually leave traces of encryption methods not seen here. Some said it was a natural language written in unknown script. Others asked why no related documents survive. Some said it was a constructed language. Others pointed out that creating one in 1420 would be astonishingly ahead of schedule. And then there is the hoax theory. Many people love the hoax theory because it is emotionally satisfying. It suggests someone centuries ago made nonsense text, drew weird plants, sold it to a wealthy collector, and laughed all the way to the bank. Honestly relatable. But hoaxing at this scale would require immense labor. Hundreds of pages of structured pseudo-language with consistent statistical properties. Detailed illustrations. Expensive parchment.
Time. Ink.
Patience. It would be the most overcommit prank in manuscript history. Possible?
Yes.
Efficient? Absolutely not. And humans, while foolish, usually prefer easier foolishness. Modern computational analysis has only deepened the puzzle. AI models, linguistic frequency studies, and pattern recognition tools have all been applied. Some findings suggest the text contains dependencies similar to real language. Some suggest generated patterns. Some suggest multiple scribes. Some suggest meaningful compression. Some suggest everyone should go home. No consensus has formed. The manuscript remains what it has always been. Persuasive, but silent. And perhaps that is why people love it. Because most mysteries eventually become admin. A missing city turns into excavation reports. A coded letter becomes tax records. A royal scandal becomes inheritance law. But the Voynich manuscript has resisted that fate. It remains beautifully unresolved. An object that invites explanation while denying closure. You can project onto it anything you like. Lost science, Women's knowledge erased by history, private jokes, herbal medicine, coded devotion, medieval fantasy, deliberate fraud, forgotten language. The book listens politely, then says nothing. In our next drift through candlelight and confusion, we'll meet the many suspects proposed as authors, the bizarre decoding attempts, and the scholars who spent years trying to outstare a manuscript that clearly enjoys winning. For now, sleep well, and if you dream of unreadable alphabets, try not to pay 600 ducats for them.
Continue.
Part 2. The suspects, the scholars, and the extremely confident guessing. Welcome back, gently bewildered travelers. Tonight we continue our slow walk through the garden paths and ink curls of the Voynich Manuscript, that elegant little book which has spent centuries causing headaches in a deeply composed manner. If you are already half asleep, excellent. That is the ideal mental state for discussing theories about. Welcome back, gently bewildered travelers. Tonight we continue our slow walk through the garden paths and ink curls of the Voynich Manuscript, that elegant little book which has spent centuries causing headaches in a deeply composed manner. If you are already half asleep, excellent. That is the ideal mental state for discussing theories about unreadable medieval texts. Historians call this being open-minded. Pillows call it something else. Last time, we met the manuscript itself. Strange script, strange plants, strange women in interconnected tubs. A general atmosphere of expensive confusion. Now we arrive at one of the most soothing parts of any historical mystery, the parade of suspects. Because once people encounter an unexplained object, they immediately begin assigning names to it with the confidence of cats selecting chairs. So, who wrote the Voynich Manuscript? The short answer is no one knows. The longer answer is many people have been blamed. Let us begin with one of the earliest celebrity candidates, Roger Bacon. Roger Bacon was a Franciscan friar, scholar, and thinker who lived in the 13th century. He studied optics, mathematics, languages, and scientific method long before that became fashionable dinner conversation. Over time, Bacon acquired the reputation many clever historical figures eventually receive, wizard adjacent. Once later generations decide someone was ahead of their time, they become attached to every mysterious invention within a 500-year radius. Need a hidden code? Roger Bacon. Need a forbidden machine? Roger Bacon. Need a glowing orb beneath a monastery? Probably Roger Bacon. The problem is timing. Radiocarbon dating places the parchment of the Voynich Manuscript in the early 15th century, roughly 1404 to 1438. Roger Bacon died in 1292. That is not a minor scheduling conflict. Could older parchment have been used later? Theoretically, yes. But nothing else strongly supports Bacon's authorship. His candidacy mostly survives because mysterious books love famous names. So we may thank him for participating spiritually. Next comes John Dee, a wonderfully dramatic option. John Dee was an English mathematician, astrologer, advisor to Elizabeth I, collector of books, and occasional practitioner of conversations with angels. He was exactly the kind of Renaissance intellectual who makes modern resumes feel lazy. Some theorists proposed that Dee either owned the manuscript, wrote it, or sold it to Emperor Rudolph II while claiming it was ancient wisdom. This would fit neatly into the long tradition of scholars needing money. Dee did travel in Central Europe. He knew collectors. He had access to manuscripts. He also had a flair for secrecy. Unfortunately, there is no firm evidence linking him directly to the book's creation. Also, the parchment dates again become awkward. The manuscript material appears older than Dee's lifetime by more than a century. History often ruins fun theories by checking dates. Then we have Edward Kelly, Dee's notorious companion. Kelly was an alchemist, medium, opportunist, and man whose life reads like someone repeatedly selected chaotic dialogue options. He claimed mystical powers, communicated with spirits, and pursued noble patronage with energetic creativity. Some imagine Kelly forging the manuscript to impress Rudolph II, who adored curiosities. One can picture him presenting the volume with grave ceremony while privately thinking, "Please buy this plant nonsense." It is not impossible. But again, evidence remains thin. Many Voynich theories operate on the principle that colorful personalities deserve involvement. And honestly fair. Another favorite suspect is Antonio Averlino, sometimes proposed because of links to unusual scripts and Renaissance networks. Others nominate obscure physicians, herbalists, monks, nuns, Jewish scholars, itinerant scribes, or secretive court intellectuals. At a certain point, the suspect list becomes any literate person with access to ink, which is broad, but not useless. Now, let us drift from authorship to decoding attempts, where the real theater begins. Once the manuscript became known in the 20th century, scholars and amateurs alike rushed toward it like moths toward a lamp labeled certain frustration. One early strategy was substitution cipher analysis. This assumes Voynich's symbols correspond to letters in a known language. Replace each strange glyph with Latin letters, and perhaps a hidden text appears. A sensible plan. It failed repeatedly. Researchers tried Latin, Italian, German, English, Czech, Hebrew, and many others. They tested frequency patterns, probable vowels, common endings, repeated words, grammatical markers. Nothing stable emerged. The text continued behaving like language while refusing to become one. Then came anagrams. Some argued the letters were scrambled. Rearranged symbols, and perhaps meaningful words appear. This method has the useful property of allowing almost any result if you are sufficiently determined and lightly supervised. It did not convince many people. Others proposed shorthand systems. Medieval scribes used abbreviations constantly. Perhaps Voynich's compressed ordinary language into a dense notation. Interesting idea. But the script remains too consistent, too self-contained, and too unlike common scribal conventions. Then there were those who believed it encoded multiple layers at once. Perhaps one symbol meant a syllable, another a word, another a sound, another a concept. A linguistic lasagna. Possible in theory, difficult in practice. Especially when no decipherment can be independently repeated. And that becomes important. Many people have announced they solved the Voynich Manuscript. Very few can persuade other specialists. This is the natural life cycle of unsolved texts. Step 1. Declare breakthrough. Step 2. Publish explanation. Step 3. Experts read it quietly. Step 4. No. One notable 20th century investigator was William F. Friedman, one of the great codebreakers of his era. Friedman helped build modern cryptanalysis in the United States. During wartime, he tackled real enemy systems with serious consequences. Then he met the Voynich Manuscript. Friedman and his team studied it for years. If anyone might crack it, surely this was the group. They did not. That failure is meaningful. Brilliant analysts with patience and method could not produce a reliable solution. The manuscript was not yielding to ordinary cipher logic. Friedman eventually leaned toward the idea that it might be an artificial or constructed language rather than a classic code, which is fascinating. Imagine someone in the 15th century inventing a full written language for private use, scholarship, ritual, or experimentation. It would be ambitious, eccentric, and wonderfully on brand for humanity. Still, no proof. Computers later joined the struggle. By the late 20th and early 21st centuries, researchers used digital transcription, frequency counts, machine learning, and statistical comparison. Computers can count patterns without getting emotionally attached, which already gives them an advantage over some scholars. They found intriguing things. Certain words appear more often in certain sections. Some glyphs prefer word beginnings, others endings. Adjacent words often resemble one another with small changes, suggesting morphology or systematic variation. Line positions matter too. Words at the start of lines sometimes differ from those later in lines. That may reflect formatting habits, grammatical rules, or a scribe who liked variety. The point is this. Random nonsense usually looks random. Voynich often does not. Yet critics note that structured nonsense can be generated. If someone used templates, copying habits, or algorithmic tricks, pseudo-language could emerge with realistic statistics. In other words, the manuscript may either be deeply meaningful or impressively fake. Classic mystery behavior. Now we should visit the illustrations again because many proposed solutions rely on them. Those plant pages inspire botanical theories. Perhaps it is an herbal manual. Medieval herbals were common and useful. They described plants, remedies, preparations, and medical uses. Reasonable enough. But the plants are troublesome. Some resemble real species, but rarely cleanly. Leaves from one plant seem attached to roots of another. Flowers become decorative hybrids. Identification becomes a group project nobody enjoys. Maybe the artist was poor at drawing from life. Maybe the plants are composites meant to hide secrets. Maybe they are symbolic. Maybe they were copied from memory by someone who had only once seen parsley and never recovered. Then the bathing women suggest gynecology, fertility, or women's medicine. Medieval medicine often linked the body to humors, cycles, baths, and herbal treatments. Water imagery may represent internal processes or cleansing. Or perhaps it is allegorical anatomy. Or perhaps the manuscript was created by someone who truly believed every concept improves when placed in a tub. The zodiac pages encourage astrological readings. Astrology was mainstream in medieval and Renaissance Europe. Courts consulted it. Physicians used it. Calendars tracked it. People loved assigning personality traits to planets long before social media. So the stars in the manuscript may indicate timing for treatments, births, seasons, or rituals. Again, plausible. Again, incomplete. Some modern scholars propose the manuscript may come from a learned but marginal tradition, practical medicine mixed with astrology, folk botany, women's health knowledge, and custom notation. Not a grand secret text, just a working manual from a niche community. Honestly, this theory feels wonderfully human, because many mysteries become less glamorous when solved. The hidden temple becomes storage space. The cursed relic becomes accounting equipment. The coded wisdom becomes a recipe binder. And yet, even a practical manual would still be extraordinary if it preserves otherwise lost knowledge. Which brings us to perhaps the most haunting possibility. What if the manuscript is readable, but only within a cultural world now gone? A local language no longer written. A personal shorthand no one else copied. A teaching code shared by a small circle. A one-off intellectual experiment whose key died with its maker. History is full of voices that vanish simply because paper decays and people do not last. The Voynich Manuscript may be less a prank than an orphan. Still, it is hard to resist stranger ideas. Secret societies. Cathars, alchemists, travelers from the East, hidden women scholars, exiles, mystics, medical convents, court charlatans with excellent penmanship. The manuscript encourages imagination because it withholds certainty. And humans hate a vacuum almost as much as they hate unreadable handwriting. In our next soft descent into parchment twilight, we'll explore the physical creation of the book itself, the scribes, pigments, page order, missing leaves, folding diagrams, and what the manuscript reveals simply by existing as an object. For now, rest easy. Somewhere in the dark, 100 experts are still arguing about a drawing of celery with roots like tentacles.
Continue.
By the late 20th and early 21st centuries, researchers used digital transcription, frequency counts, machine learning, and statistical comparison. Computers can count patterns without getting emotionally attached, which already gives them an advantage over some scholars. They found intriguing things. Certain words appear more often in certain sections. Some glyphs prefer word beginnings, others endings. Adjacent words often resemble one another with small changes, suggesting morphology or systematic variation. Line positions matter too. Words at the start of lines sometimes differ from those later in lines. That may reflect formatting habits, grammatical rules, or a scribe who liked variety. The point is this. Random nonsense usually looks random. Voynich often does not. Yet critics note that structured nonsense can be generated. If someone used templates, copying habits, or algorithmic tricks, pseudo-language could emerge with realistic statistics. In other words, the manuscript may either be deeply meaningful or impressively fake. Classic mystery behavior. Now we should visit the illustrations again, because many proposed solutions rely on them. Those plant pages inspire botanical theories. Perhaps it is an herbal manual. Medieval herbals were common and useful. They described plants, remedies, preparations, and medical uses. Reasonable enough. But the plants are troublesome. Some resemble real species, but rarely cleanly. Leaves from one plant seem attached to roots of another. Flowers become decorative hybrids. Identification becomes a group project nobody enjoys. Maybe the artist was poor at drawing from life. Maybe the plants are composites meant to hide secrets. Maybe they are symbolic. Maybe they were copied from memory by someone who had only once seen parsley and never recovered. Then the bathing women suggest gynecology, fertility, or women's medicine. Medieval medicine often linked the body to humors, cycles, baths, and herbal treatments. Water imagery may represent internal processes or cleansing. Or perhaps it is allegorical anatomy. Or perhaps the manuscript was created by someone who truly believed every concept improves when placed in a tub. The zodiac pages encourage astrological readings. Astrology was mainstream in medieval and Renaissance Europe. Courts consulted it. Physicians used it. Calendars tracked it. People loved assigning personality traits to planets long before social media. So the stars in the manuscript may indicate timing for treatments, births, seasons, or rituals. Again, plausible. Again, incomplete. Some modern scholars propose the manuscript may come from a learned but marginal tradition, practical medicine mixed with astrology, folk botany, women's health knowledge, and custom notation. Not a grand secret text, just a working manual from a niche community. Honestly, this theory feels wonderfully human, because many mysteries become less glamorous when solved. The hidden temple becomes storage space. The cursed relic becomes accounting equipment. The coded wisdom becomes a recipe binder. And yet, even a practical manual would still be extraordinary if it preserves otherwise lost knowledge. Which brings us to perhaps the most haunting possibility. What if the manuscript is readable, but only within a cultural world now gone? A local language no longer written. A personal shorthand no one else copied. A teaching code shared by a small circle. A one-off intellectual experiment whose key died with its maker. History is full of voices that vanish simply because paper decays and people do not last. The Voynich Manuscript may be less a prank than an orphan. Still, it is hard to resist stranger ideas. Secret societies. Cathars, alchemists, travelers from the East, hidden women scholars, exiles, mystics, medical convents, court charlatans with excellent penmanship. The manuscript encourages imagination because it withholds certainty. And humans hate a vacuum almost as much as they hate unreadable handwriting. In our next soft descent into parchment twilight, we'll explore the physical creation of the book itself, the scribes, pigments, page order, missing leaves, folding diagrams, and what the manuscript reveals simply by existing as an object. For now, rest easy. Somewhere in the dark, 100 experts are still arguing about a drawing of celery with roots like tentacles. Continue. Welcome back, night scholars. Tonight we continue our unhurried glide through the Voynich Manuscript, the only book in history that can make experts stare at vegetables for decades. We have met the suspects. We have watched cryptographers age in real time. We have seen theories bloom and wilt like the manuscript's own uncertain plants. Now we turn to something calmer and, in many ways, more trustworthy than interpretation: the object itself. Because while words may hide, parchment is often refreshingly literal. A manuscript can tell us many things simply by being touched, measured, tested, and mildly judged under proper lighting. It can reveal habits of production, costs, materials, revisions, damage, and the everyday choices of people who made books before printers filled the world with identical rectangles. And the Voynich Manuscript, for all its secrecy, is still a handmade object. That matters. Let us begin with parchment. The pages are made from vellum, animal skin prepared for writing. Usually calf, sheep, or goat, depending on region, budget, and what was available nearby, having a very unfortunate week. Parchment was durable, flexible, and expensive compared with ordinary scraps. You did not casually create hundreds of pages of nonsense on fine writing material unless you had resources, confidence, or a truly committed prank budget. Radiocarbon dating, conducted in the early 21st century, tested samples of the parchment and placed them in the early 15th century, around 1404 to 1438. This was a major development. For years, some hoped the manuscript might be much older, perhaps linked to Roger Bacon or other earlier figures. Carbon dating politely escorted many romantic theories toward the exit. The parchment is 15th century. That does not prove when the text was written, but it strongly suggests the book itself belongs to that era. And what an era it was! Europe in the early 1400s was a place of courts, merchants, plague aftershocks, monasteries, urban workshops, rising literacy, regional languages, astrology, medicine, devotional books, and intense interest in practical knowledge. People wanted calendars, remedies, diagrams, prayers, charts, legal texts, romances, and manuals explaining how to do highly specific things. A mysterious compendium of plants, stars, bodies, and notes would not have seemed impossible.
Odd, yes.
But not impossible. Now, let us discuss handwriting. The manuscript appears to have been written by more than one hand, or at least by one writer whose style varied over time. Scholars studying letter forms, stroke habits, spacing, and consistency have suggested multiple scribes may have contributed. This is common in manuscript culture. Books were collaborative objects. One person prepared pages. Another ruled lines. Another copied text. Another added drawings. Another painted details. Another corrected mistakes. Another charged everyone too much. If the Voynich manuscript involved several hands, it may have emerged from a workshop or a small scholarly circle rather than a solitary genius muttering over candles. Though solitary muttering should never be ruled out. The script itself is tidy. That point deserves emphasis. Voynichese is not wild scratching. It is careful, regular, practiced writing. Symbols repeat consistently. Line spacing is controlled. Paragraphs are organized. Some pages show a professional neatness that suggests experience. Whoever wrote this was comfortable doing so. Even if they were inventing nonsense, they were inventing nonsense elegantly. The ink appears to be typical iron gall or related medieval ink forms, nothing dramatically exotic. This is useful because it suggests ordinary materials rather than some lost luminous compound from a secret order of moon pharmacists. Sometimes history is disappointingly normal. Then again, normal ink wrote abnormal things. Now we drift toward one of the most charmingly frustrating features of the manuscript: page order. Not all pages are where they originally belonged. Some folios appear misplaced. Others may be missing entirely. Certain gatherings, the folded groups of pages sewn together into a book, were rearranged over time. Numbers added later by owners do not always match ideal sequence. This is extremely common in old books and extremely annoying in mysterious ones. Imagine solving a puzzle where someone has removed several pieces, swapped others, and then told you the picture might be upside down. That is where Voynich researchers live. Some fold-out pages complicate matters further. Yes, fold-outs. Several leaves open into larger diagrams, including circular charts and multi-panel layouts. These suggest the creator wanted to display information too complex for a normal page. That is a strong sign of intentional content. Hoaxers can draw strange flowers. But planning fold-out data displays requires effort, structure, and the kind of organizational instinct usually associated with someone who alphabetizes spices. One famous foldout contains a map-like arrangement of connected shapes, towers, stars, pathways, or perhaps abstract districts of conceptual confusion. Interpretations vary wildly. City plan? Cosmology? Memory palace? Biological schema? Fantasy board games centuries ahead of schedule? No one knows. Still, the fold-out proves ambition. This was not a casual notebook. Now, let us consider corrections. Yes, even unreadable mysteries contain edits. Some pages show scraped parchment, overwritten symbols, adjusted drawings, and inserted details. That means the maker revised the work during production. This may sound minor, but it is important. People revise texts they care about. A fraudulent object made only to deceive might prioritize appearance over internal correction. But the Voynich manuscript sometimes behaves like a working document, where the creator noticed issues and fixed them. That leans, though not conclusively, toward sincerity. Of course, a dedicated fraudster could also revise carefully. There is no theory so strong that someone cannot complicate it immediately. Let us float gently to the illustrations. The drawings were likely added in stages. In some places, outlines came first, then pigments later. Coloring is uneven. Certain sections are more polished than others. Some figures seem quickly tinted, as though deadlines approached or enthusiasm declined. This, too, is very human. Many great projects begin with vision and end with good enough. The pigments themselves appear consistent with materials available in the late medieval period. Greens, reds, blues, browns. Nothing requiring alien minerals or Renaissance time travel. Though the green baths remain spiritually suspicious. The plant illustrations, as mentioned, are perplexing. Yet, from a material perspective, they are confidently drawn. Roots twist elaborately. Leaves branch with rhythm. Flowers bloom in stylized symmetry. Even when botanically uncertain, they are visually deliberate. This raises a subtle possibility. Perhaps accuracy was not the goal. Modern viewers often expect scientific illustration, exact leaves, measurable petals, recognizable species. But medieval and early Renaissance images could be symbolic, mnemonic, or composite. A drawing might emphasize medicinal parts, seasonal identity, humoral qualities, or inherited artistic convention rather than photographic realism. In other words, if the root mattered most, the root got drama. If the flower signaled heat or dryness, it might be stylized accordingly. The Voynich plants may look wrong because we are asking the wrong question, or they may look wrong because they are wrong. The manuscript remains generous with options. Now let us speak of wear and use. The book shows signs of handling over time. It was opened, turned,
Stored.
rebound, numbered.
Owned. Moved.
It was not buried untouched in a sealed chest awaiting a dramatic soundtrack. Someone used this book, perhaps many someones. That alone argues against pure nonsense created and immediately forgotten. A useless fraud might circulate briefly, but the Voynich manuscript was preserved across centuries. Owners valued it enough to keep it.
Why?
Maybe they believed it contained secrets. Maybe it genuinely served a purpose they understood. Maybe collectors simply love mysterious objects, which remains true to this day. There is also the matter of cost. Producing a manuscript required parchment, ink, pigments, labor, binding, and time. Even modest books represented investment. Wealthy patrons, institutions, or prosperous professionals were the likely customers. So, if this manuscript was commissioned, who paid? A physician wanting a private reference text? An astrologer crafting bespoke tools? A noble collector seeking prestige? A convent preserving women's remedies discreetly? A scholar pursuing a private system no one asked for? All plausible, all unproven. And then there is the lonely possibility that the creator paid personally, pouring savings into a life project that nobody else ever fully understood. History is full of private obsessions. Some become cathedrals. Some become unreadable books. Modern imaging technologies have also examined the manuscript. Multispectral analysis can reveal faded marks, erased writing, pigment layering, and hidden details invisible to the naked eye. Researchers hoped perhaps some forgotten key, underdrawing, or erased note might emerge saying something useful like, "Cipher key on next page." Instead, results have been interesting but not revolutionary. Some corrections and material details surfaced, yet no grand solution appeared. The manuscript continues to offer breadcrumbs while hiding the loaf. One especially curious feature is the relationship between text and images. Labels appear near stars, plants, body parts, or diagram segments. Paragraphs cluster beside illustrations. Layout suggests explanatory intention. This is not random text dumped beside random art. The two systems interact. That means if one day the writing is deciphered, the images may suddenly become clear. Or vice versa. Imagine discovering that the mysterious bathing women are simply labeled Tuesday procedures. Entire generations would need a lie down. The physical manuscript also reminds us of something easy to forget. Someone sat and made this line by line. They sharpened quills, mixed ink, turned pages, paused for meals, maybe cursed when smudging margins, maybe admired their own work, maybe worried no one would understand it. And in a profound sense, they were correct. For 6 centuries, that human presence lingers behind every folio. Not a myth, not an abstract puzzle. A person or persons working carefully in a room somewhere between 1404 and 1438, creating a book with purpose known to them and then lost to us. It is strangely intimate. We often treat the Voynich Manuscript like a code machine, but it is also evidence of labor, taste, design, planning, and hope. Someone believed this was worth making. In our next slow candlelit wander, we'll visit the grander theories, secret medicine, hidden religion, women's knowledge, coded science, deliberate hoax, and why every generation reinvents the manuscript in its own image. For now, rest well. And if you begin organizing your pantry into fold-out diagrams, please know you are not alone. Welcome back, calm investigators. Tonight we continue our slow and steady float through the Voynich Manuscript, the medieval volume that has inspired more theories than actual readable sentences. We have studied its pages. We have admired its costly parchment. We have watched scholars squint at roots and circles with heroic stamina. Now we arrive at one of the most revealing parts of the story. Not what the manuscript is, but what people desperately want it to be. Because every age looks at the Voynich Manuscript and sees itself reflected back through green ink and unresolved anxiety. A mysterious book is never just a mysterious book. It becomes a mirror. Into it people pour hopes, fears, favorite hobbies, and occasionally alarming levels of certainty. So let us drift through the grand theories one by one, gently and without sudden movement. We begin with perhaps the oldest respectable explanation. The manuscript is a medical text. This is not glamorous enough for some people, which makes it instantly more plausible. Late medieval and early Renaissance Europe loved medical manuscripts. There were herbals explaining plants and remedies, calendars advising when to bleed patients, texts on baths, digestion, women's health, fertility, urine analysis, planetary influences, and balancing bodily humors with the precision of people who had never seen a germ but felt deeply committed anyway. A book containing plants, stars, diagrams, containers, and unclothed human figures could easily fit within that broad medical world. The bathing women may represent therapeutic bathing. Warm baths were used for treatments, relaxation, fertility, and general recovery. Mineral waters, heated tubs, steam chambers, and medicinal soaking all existed. Medieval people absolutely enjoyed the idea that sitting in warm water might fix things. To be fair, many modern people agree. The tubes and channels shown in the manuscript may symbolize circulation, bodily pathways, or plumbing systems feeding baths. They may also be purely diagrammatic, not literal. Imagine if future archaeologists judged modern anatomy textbooks by cartoon arrows and pastel organs. We would deserve confusion. Then there are the plants. Many medieval remedies depended on herbs, roots, seeds, bark, flowers, oils, and combinations that ranged from sensible to optimistic. If the Voynich plants are stylized or intentionally disguised, they might encode medicinal ingredients known only to certain practitioners. This theory appeals to many scholars because it requires no secret society, no aliens, no wizard emperor panic purchase. Just practical knowledge written in a private or specialized script. And honestly, history is full of private scripts. Merchants used shorthand. Doctors kept proprietary recipes. Alchemists obscured formulas. Families encoded correspondence. Scribes abbreviated everything in sight. Sometimes secrecy was prestige. Sometimes it was protection. Sometimes it was simply annoying coworkers. Now, let us glide toward another beloved theory. The manuscript preserves women's knowledge. This idea gained attention because mainstream written scholarship in medieval Europe was often dominated by male institutions, universities, monasteries, clerical networks, court bureaucracies. Yet women practiced healing constantly. Midwives, household caregivers, herbal specialists, noble women managing estates, nuns in convent infirmaries, mothers passing remedies through generations, all held practical medical knowledge, especially concerning childbirth, menstruation, fertility, bathing, diet, and domestic treatment. The Voynich bathing figures, many distinctly female, invite this interpretation. So, do certain anatomical-looking pages and herbal associations. Could the manuscript be a compendium of women's medicine, encoded for privacy or community use?
Possibly.
There is no direct proof. But unlike some wilder theories, this one fits real historical patterns. Much knowledge was informal, local, and underdocumented in official archives. Some vanished because institutions failed to preserve it. The manuscript may not be the lost women's medical text people dream of, but it is reasonable to ask whether its creators or users included women more centrally than typical manuscript histories once assumed. And if so, that would be quietly significant. Next, let us float into the astrological explanation. This is nearly unavoidable because the manuscript practically waves zodiac signs at us. Medieval astrology was not fringe entertainment. It was woven into medicine, agriculture, politics, weather prediction, and personal timing. Learned physicians consulted planetary positions. Certain body parts were linked to zodiac signs. Treatment dates might be selected astrologically. If you think modern scheduling apps are intense, wait until Mars enters Scorpio. A manuscript combining herbs and stars could therefore be entirely mainstream for its time. Need treatment for a fever?
Check the moon.
Planning surgery? Consult Taurus. Trying to understand why your cousin is impossible? Medieval astrology had thoughts. Some Voynich diagrams may be calendars or seasonal cycles. The women arranged around zodiac circles may indicate monthly phases, bodily processes, or symbolic correspondences. Again, this theory lacks a full decipherment, but aligns well with period habits. Then we come to the alchemy theory. naturally. No mysterious manuscript can avoid alchemy for long. Alchemy in historical reality was a broad blend of proto-chemistry, metallurgy, medicine, symbolism, spiritual transformation, and ambitious optimism regarding lead. It used coded language often. Practitioners concealed methods, partly from rivals and partly because sounding cryptic improves branding. The Voynich jars, plants, strange fluids, and diagrams invite alchemical readings. Green pools become solvents. Roots become ingredients. Circular charts become transformation cycles. Bathing women become symbolic personifications of substances or stages. At a certain point, anything can become alchemy if you narrate confidently enough. Still, secrecy and symbolism genuinely were common in alchemical writing.
So the theory survives.
Then we must visit the religious theory. Some propose the manuscript encodes heterodox spirituality, mystical devotion, or teachings too sensitive for open circulation. Medieval Europe had many movements existing near the boundaries of orthodoxy. Ideas could be monitored, censored, or misunderstood. A private symbolic text might make sense in that environment. But the manuscript lacks obvious Christian imagery common in devotional works. No saints leap forward. No crosses dominate. No clear biblical scenes appear. That absence is notable, though not decisive. Some say this means hidden heresy. Others say it simply means the book was not religious. And once again, the manuscript smiles faintly and declines comment. Now, let us drift into one of the public favorites. The lost scientific genius theory. This theory claims the manuscript preserves advanced botanical, medical, astronomical, or technical knowledge centuries ahead of its time. People adore this possibility because it flatters us. We imagine forgotten geniuses crushed by history, truths hidden in vaults, knowledge almost gained then tragically lost. Sometimes that happens, usually less dramatically. The problem is that nothing in the manuscript clearly demonstrates advanced science once stripped of mystery glow. The stars are stars. Plants are plants-ish. Diagrams are diagrams. There are no obvious engines, telescopes, equations, or surgical breakthroughs waving from the margins. If it contains advanced ideas, they are hidden extremely well, possibly too well. Then we arrive at the hoax theory, elegant in its cynicism. Perhaps someone in the 15th or 16th century created a convincing nonsense manuscript to sell to a wealthy collector, maybe even Emperor Rudolph II. This explains the unreadable text perfectly. It also explains the strange illustrations. It explains why no related documents survive. It explains our pain. And yet, problems remain. The manuscript is labor-intensive. Its text has statistical structure. Its sections are internally coherent. Its illustrations interact with layout in thoughtful ways. It looks less like random fraud and more like a system, whether meaningful or invented. Could a clever fraudster build such a system?
Certainly.
Could they sustain it across hundreds of pages? Also, yes.
Would they?
That is where eyebrows rise. Fraud usually seeks efficiency. The Voynich manuscript radiates commitment. Then there is the outsider language theory. Perhaps the text records a real language poorly documented in Europe, transcribed into a custom script by someone bilingual or inventive. Maybe a traveler. Maybe a migrant community. Maybe an intermediary at a court fascinated by foreign knowledge. This would explain language-like structure without matching familiar European tongues. But evidence is scarce. No secure parallels have emerged, and proposed languages tend to reflect whatever the proposer already studies, which is deeply human. A Hebrew specialist sees Hebrew. A Nahuatl specialist sees Nahuatl. A Slavic scholar sees Slavic. A person who has not slept in 3 days sees Atlantis. We should also mention the constructed language theory. Some linguists and cryptographers consider this surprisingly strong. A deliberate invented language with regular patterns, designed for secrecy, philosophy, medicine, or experimentation. This sounds modern, but humans have always invented systems. Codes, shorthand, ritual languages, symbolic alphabets, mnemonic scripts, all long predate modern conlangs. A 15th century scholar deciding ordinary language was inadequate feels entirely believable. Pretentious, perhaps, but believable. Now here is the deeper truth beneath all these theories. Each one says as much about us as about the manuscript. Victorian scholars wanted hidden Baconian genius. 20th century cryptographers wanted ciphers. Modern readers want marginalized knowledge recovered. Internet culture wants aliens, maps, and viral certainty. Academics want interdisciplinary nuance and funding. Collectors want prestige. Everyone wants the book to reward them personally. The manuscript, however, remains impartial. It offers ambiguous plants to botanists, ambiguous stars to astronomers, ambiguous women to medical historians, ambiguous symbols to linguists, ambiguous vibes to everyone else. That may be its greatest power. Most artifacts become legible through context. The Voynich Manuscript sits just beyond context, close enough to tempt, far enough to evade. It is a locked door with decorative hinges. And because it is unsolved, it stays alive. Once deciphered, if ever deciphered, it may become ordinary. Perhaps a practical women's health manual. Perhaps a coded herbal. Perhaps a regional notebook of astrology and recipes. Useful, fascinating, historically rich, but no longer magical. So some small selfish part of humanity may not truly want it solved. We enjoy mysteries that do not threaten us. We like puzzles with parchment edges. In our next quiet passage, we'll meet the modern age of Voynich obsession. Internet sleuths, AI claims, fake breakthroughs, museum fame, and how one medieval manuscript became a celebrity without saying a single readable word. For now, close your eyes. And if you dream of zodiac charts and medicinal tubs, please use the warm water responsibly. Welcome back, gentle insomniacs. Tonight we continue our soft procession through the Voynich Manuscript, the one book that became famous by refusing interviews. We have wandered through parchment, theories, suspicious baths, and humanity's endless need to assign meaning to decorative circles. Now we reach the modern era. And if you thought 17th century scholars were intense, Wait until the internet discovers an unsolved mystery. Because once the Voynich Manuscript entered public imagination in the digital age, it ceased to be merely a rare manuscript in a library. It became content. This was inevitable. The internet loves three things above almost all others: hidden knowledge, confidence without evidence, and zoomable images of strange objects. The Voynich Manuscript offers all three in gift-wrapped form. Its pages were digitized and made widely available. Suddenly, anyone with a screen, curiosity, and several free hours could examine folios once reserved for librarians and specialists. This democratization was genuinely valuable. It also produced chaos. Thousands of amateur researchers downloaded transcriptions, enlarged plant roots to unreasonable scales, compared symbols, built spreadsheets, and declared that mainstream academia had somehow missed the obvious. The obvious, naturally, was different every week. One person saw medieval Welsh. Another found Turkish. Another identified Aztec herbal terminology. Another proved it was written by nuns. Another proved it was written by merchants. Another proved it was encoded Latin. Another proved it was a star map. Another proved it was female reproductive philosophy. Another proved it was generated by rotating grids. Another proved it was a recipe book. Another proved it was from Atlantis, which is less a theory than a recurring weather pattern. The internet, in fairness, has expanded many fields through crowd collaboration. But it has also taught us that giving millions of people image access to an unsolved object results in 12 million conclusions. And still, there is charm in this. For centuries, only elites handled manuscripts. Now anyone can stare at folio diagrams at 2:13 a.m. and think, I alone understand this vegetable. That is progress of a kind. Let us drift to the role of serious digital scholarship. Unlike random declarations typed in all caps, many researchers used careful methods. They built standardized transcriptions of the script, converting each glyph into searchable symbols. They measured word frequency, line structure, symbol position, and repeated clusters. These data sets mattered enormously. Before digitization, scholars relied on copies, notes, photographs, and inconsistent readings. Computers allowed broader comparison at scale. Patterns emerged. Certain glyph groups occur mainly in botanical sections. Others cluster in astronomical areas. Words near illustrations sometimes differ from running text. Adjacent words often resemble each other with slight changes, as though inflected forms or derived variants were in use. This was interesting. Language often behaves that way. So, do systems pretending to be language? Which brings us back to the manuscript's favorite hobby, remaining plausible in multiple directions. Now enter artificial intelligence. Whenever AI appears, two things happen immediately. First, some useful tools are created. Second, headlines become unbearable. Researchers use machine learning models to compare Voynich's patterns with known languages, scripts, and encoding systems. Some studies suggested similarities to natural language distributions. Others proposed candidate source languages obscured by transformed spelling. A few papers claimed dramatic progress. The media, naturally, translated tentative statistical resemblance under constrained assumptions into mystery book finally solved. Then specialists read the paper and quietly made tea. This cycle has repeated several times. One team suggests the text maps onto Hebrew through algorithmic anagramming. Another suggests abbreviated Romance language forms. Another proposes Proto-Romance itself, a kind of ancestral vernacular cluster. Another sees phonetic encoding. Another identifies generated pseudotext. Each arrives with charts. Each receives attention. Each encounters criticism. The issue is rarely that ideas are impossible. It is that real decipherment requires more than pattern matching. A convincing solution should do several things. Read substantial passages consistently. Explain grammar. Predict unseen readings. Fit illustrations. Work across the whole manuscript. Be replicable by other scholars. And ideally not depend on 27 custom rules introduced halfway through page 3. Many claims fail somewhere in that list. Still, AI has helped narrow possibilities. It can identify regularities humans miss, compare distributions rapidly, and test hypotheses without needing sleep or ego management. Though one suspects even a machine, after enough Voynich exposure, might sigh internally. Now, let us float toward the manuscript as public celebrity. The Voynich Manuscript today exists in a peculiar status. It is both serious historical artifact and pop culture mystery mascot. It appears in documentaries, podcasts, YouTube essays, novels, escape rooms, conspiracy lists, video games, coffee table books, and social media threads written by people who confuse enthusiasm with sourcing. It has become shorthand for the unsolved weird thing. Need atmosphere in fiction? Put a coded manuscript on a desk. Need intrigue in a museum exhibit? Mention the Voynich. Need clicks? Add finally decoded. Need comments? Mention aliens. This fame has upsides. More people care about manuscripts. Libraries gain visibility. Historical curiosity spreads. People learn that the past was not a gray line of kings memorizing taxes. It was also full of eccentric objects and unfinished puzzles. The downside is myth inflation. Some now imagine the Voynich manuscript as uniquely supernatural or impossibly advanced. In reality, it is mysterious but still rooted in ordinary historical worlds: scribes, pigments, patrons, medicine, astrology, collecting culture. It is weird, but it is human weird. That distinction matters. Now, let us discuss a quieter modern contribution: conservation. Rare books age. Parchment warps. Bindings weaken. Pigments fade. Handling risks damage. So modern custodians must balance access with preservation. Scholars want to inspect folios. The public wants images. The object wants humidity control and fewer fingerprints. This tension exists across archives everywhere. The manuscript now lives under careful stewardship at Yale University, where it receives more respectful treatment than many living celebrities. Digitization has helped immensely. High-resolution scans let people study details remotely without repeatedly handling fragile pages. So while the internet has produced many improbable claims, it has also protected the book physically. Even chaos can be useful. Now, one of the funniest modern Voynich traditions is the annual "I solved it" announcement. These come in many forms: the linguistic revelation, the hidden map theory, the women's code discovery, the secret herbal breakthrough, the alien calendar interpretation, the forgotten dialect bombshell, the grid cipher triumph, the emotional medium post. Often the language is bold, undeniable, definitive. At last, scholars stunned. Scholars, in reality, are usually grading papers or reheating soup. But the pattern tells us something deep. Humans crave closure. An unresolved object nags at the mind. We want the cabinet labeled. We want the code cracked. We want to be the person who notices what everyone else missed. And occasionally someone really does. Many major discoveries began as outsider insights or fresh perspectives. So skepticism must not become snobbery. Yet humility remains essential. The Voynich Manuscript has outlasted reputations. It has watched generations stride in declaring victory and leave carrying footnotes.
There is wisdom in that.
Now, let us consider another possibility raised by modern study. What if there is no single solution? Perhaps the manuscript is layered. Some sections practical, others symbolic. Some text meaningful, some filler. Some copied from sources, some invented. Some pages by one hand, some by another. A workshop project evolving over time. This would explain why simple one-key decipherments fail. We often want mysteries to have one lock and one key. Real history prefers cluttered rooms with several doors. And finally, there is the emotional truth of the modern Voynich obsession.